Hi everyone, Alex is here and today we'll be talking about testing. So, unit, integration, regression, smoke, sanity, acceptance, end-to-end, performance, security test. All of that we'll cover today. Let's start. So, what we'll see right now? We'll see unit testing. Why do we need that? So, in general, when you're creating your feature, you're making a specific function, model, etc. And you need to make a small test that will check that it works in the specific with the specific data. As here, we're just writing, for example, multiply function, we're making unit test, we're importing unit test, and with assertions, so we're taking 3 and 4, we should have 12 as a result. And we just write Python unit test example.py and it will run. So that's all how it works. You should use unit test. It is the basement of all of your applications. So this is the main thing that should be in every app. So once more, when you're creating any new feature, any new function, write such thing to that. That's how it should be. Integration test. For integration test, we're checking how does components integrate between themselves. So in general, it can be everything that you can imagine, but mostly it's for your backend and database. So here we can check a small Flask implementation that we have a row with add with both method. We're requesting some item, we're adding that to the B, and we're checking is that is correct. If we have the result from that, if yes, that's everything what we need. So this is integration test. When we are working on that, when you're creating couple of components, you just can create file with such integration test and you can run and check if everything is working. So if your integration works between systems, if you're creating a new component or you create a new connection between your instances, it can be database, it can be two components or any other things. But have such integration will help you to be sure that your components are working correctly. Regression. What is regression? And honestly speaking, everything is very simple. Regression test is just runs all the tests that you have and check if all the old features are working. So you can create a new feature, but it can pass all of the tests that you have for that feature. But will you be sure that you didn't break everything that was before created? So regression test will help you with that. And in general, for example, for Python, that's quite simple. You just write a function that is before the name, there is the test prefix, and then you save file with test underline and anything then and just .py. And then you just run Pytest. That will just take all the tests and make a regression. And you'll see if all of the past features are working or not. And if they're working, you can continue. So that is one of the most important tests that are in any of companies. It doesn't matter you're small one, medium, or big one. This one should be, because such regression test will make you ensure that everything works correct. Smoke test. Smoke test is also one of the simplest tests, and it just helps us to understand that something is live. So it is working mostly when you're deploying your feature. It can be in CI/CD, for example. It can just make a request to a specific route to discover if the status code is 200 and if it works. Because there could be any other things. Server can be down, authorization cannot be works, or any other things, and smoke test will just help you to be sure that your specific API works. This one really should be in CI/CD, or it can be also a regular one, just to be sure that not everything is working and not down, because once more you can have any attacks, or you can have a huge load with users. So this one will make you sure. The next one is Sanity. So Sanity test just take a specific function and checks if this correct working. So this one can be work in general with unit test, but specifically this one takes a lot of behaviors, and when unit test works for all of the components to be working, Sanity works with function. So here is the difference. For example, you are creating login system. You can make unit test for login requests and with invalid user, valid user, invalid password, empty user, empty password, and etc. But what will make Sanity test? It will check exactly functions, because unit tests can have a lot of tests. For example, you can have tests for checking inputs if it is empty or not, if it is if it has right amount of characters, if you have been locked in, or etc. But Sanity will take the functions. For example, we're only checking if empty checking if empty value is working, or for example, if our encoding to password is working correct, or our GVT gives the result back correct, or decodes a result correct. So this one will take specifically functions that are using in unit test. So unit test checks mostly features, like all of along, but Sanity checks the functions that this unit test is using. It is not so popular because you can have a lot of functions, and nearly big companies doesn't make such things because it is pretty sure that they will work. But in general, it's best practice to have most bags that you can check, most tests. If you have more tests, it is always better. So Sanity will help you to work with functions that our unit tests are using to check. Next one, acceptance. This is interesting one, and it's not so hard, honestly speaking, to represent it. It is not so popular, honestly speaking, and mostly you have specific testers who are checking that manually, but in general you can make that automated in such a way. So it calls acceptance tense. You can use behave, for example, for that. You should install that. And for such thing, you have just two files. First one is our feature file, features login.feature. And here you just should write with tabs what you're expecting. You're expecting feature login, scenario valid login, and what you wanted to have. Give I'm on the login page. When I enter valid credentials, then I should see the dashboard. Such connections, if they're okay, if they're working. So in your feature file, you write such things. Give I'm on the login page. When I enter valid credential, then I should see dashboard. And such thing will help you to check that your connections between your functions works correct. So it is once more different from unit test. It just helps to understand if the scenario is right, because you can be locked in, everything can go good, but the scenario how it works can be broken. For example, you just mixed steps. The result is good, but you mix steps, and it can cause for some problem in the future. But such test will help you to have right order of your functions, not the result. Unit test is checking the result, but behave, is checking your order testing. That is really interesting. I didn't know like a lot of companies who are using that, but I'm sure that if you use that, you'll have everything in a structure. And once more time, remember, it is better to have something unstructured than different. E2E test. It is one of the most popular. There are a lot of questions about that, but in general, end-to-end test. This is the test when you're trying to automate all of the process that you have with UI, databases, backends, let it be even servers checking. I don't know, like it is how the user will work on. For such tests, you can use Playwright or any other frameworks, and mostly what it will help you. It will help you to check how the user should go through all the process. For example, you're taking the browser, so it launches the Chrome automatically. It is going to a new page. It goes to the specific route. We're checking the title if it's correct. We're clicking on the button, so we have click functions. And for example, for such one, I'm using JS, and mostly I think that when you're making end-to-end tests, it's better to use JS. Why? Because you'll work mostly with your web part, or it can be also mobile part, but it will work in a little bit different way. But when you're working with specific browsing, so you should take some, for example, IDs to click on the button, or you should know to which button you should click that will run click function. So all of that stuff is better to work with JavaScript, because it will be easier for you to work with your application that is mainly on JavaScript. It can be Angular, Swift, White, or React, Vue or React. It doesn't matter, but all of them are using JS, and it will be easier for you to use the same JS for checking that. So end-to-end tests, they're very heavily, and you shouldn't run them for every, for example, change that you're making. Not. You should run them only if everything is accepted. If your feature is working correct, if your manager agrees that this is the result that he or she wanted to have, you're checking end-to-end test. If it works correct, you're just pushing that to periodic check. For example, at night, then you wake up and check if everything is correct, because you can see that something can be down. For example, one of your services can be down, or for example, your input was changed by another coworker, and your end-to-end test doesn't work, and you see that the user will have a problem in specific page at specific moment for working with your feature. So that's why you should have end-to-end test. It will make you sure that you're using correct form of testing and correct form of your application. But once more time, it's heavy. Use it periodically and rarely. That's important. Next one, performance test. This is interesting test. It is also writing mostly in CI/CD test. It is quite easy, and it just helps us to understand how good in performance it is, because we can, for example, make feature that can just make your web page slower, or you can see that your backend is really giving your response with a long time, so it is really not so good performance thing. So for such thing, you can just work with Locust. It will make all of the report that you have, and it will help you to be sure the specific variant that you're using will work correct. That's how you should check that in mind, so that such test is working mostly in CI/CD. It is lightweight, but you shouldn't work with that like with every year change. So when once more time everything is ready to be deployed, you're just checking if your performance is good or not. And the end one, it is security test. It is not so easy to be run, because mostly such one you're using specific applications for such tests, but this is just a conceptual how it can be working on. And in general, you can see there is one application that you can check for that, and it is just checking if you're secure from any SQL injections, XSS, or any other form of attacks. And it is very important for e-commerce, fintech companies, and in general for large companies that have a lot of people who are using this application, because such test will make you sure that such problems won't appear. Mostly you're just writing which problems you can have and how you can access them, and such application will just take it over, check if everything is correct, and go further. Once more time, it can be run after performance test, so you'll be sure that you have a good security that is working correct, and that you will be sure that no one will attack your site. And it can be, but you'll be secure that everything will work right. So just to make conclusions, how you can work with all of these tests. Unit testing should be used as a baseline of all of your application. So you're making a feature, you make unit tests, how such feature should work. And with every save, you're just checking if your tests are working good. Not with every test, but when you're thinking that, okay, it is working, it's good, just make sure that unit testing is going through also good. Integration test shouldn't be used for as a unit test. It should be used when you're making integration between components, and when you think that your component work good, and you can check that the connection between the components works fine. Regression test should be run with every new feature. So you're ready to deploy, you're running regression test, and you'll check if you didn't broke anything before. If everything works correct, everything works fine, that's nice, you can go further. If not, please check what just broke your specific regression test. Smoke test just will help you to ensure that your specific endpoint API is working. It can be also used, for example, for periodic, or for mostly for before deploying, because when you're running deploying, you're just checking that after deployment if your service works. If it works, no problem, you can everything is set. But if, for example, you deployed your project, your new API, and in 20 minutes it's still not have status code 200, you have a problem, and you can check why. And such smoke test will help you with that. Okay, so let's go further with sanity test. Sanity test can be used for checking your small functions, and that can be work with your unit test in general, and you can check that also before going to deployment. For example, you're running unit tests that are working correct, and before deployment, you are checking if sanity test, if all of your functions works right. Or you can also use that as a unit test, so with every time you think that your component or your implementation is working, so you can run such test. So it's up to you. Because sanity test is quite simple, it's only for one specific function, like for each specific function, and as you think it will be good. I think, you know what, I think it's good to run it with unit tests, so you'll be sure that all of the logic is working and specific functions are working. Yeah, I think it will be better. The next one, acceptance. Acceptance also really good when you have time for that and you can write the scenario how your specific logic should work. This one, it is also good to work with unit tests, for example, when you see that all the logic, like all the scenario, is working good. But if it's heavily, you can run that before deployment. For example, if you can't run that with a unit test. So it just checks how heavily your project is and how many scenarios you have. But I think mostly you'll be able to work that with unit test. End-to-end test. This one is really heavily, and remember, run it periodically. Just at the night, on the evening, on the morning, you'll know if everything works correct. So that's how the user will work with your interface. That interface will ask your backend, and backend will ask your database, and etc., and vice versa. So it is the full version how your user will work with your application. So please write that, make that. It's really important. It's one of, I think this is top one test that you should have, but it is heavy. It should be done periodically at night. And performance test. So this one can check if your specific implementation works good with performance of your application, and this one can be worked before deployment, because you shouldn't work that with periodically, because specific functions they're using before deployment and they won't be changed after that. So just check that before deployment. It doesn't should be checked with unit tests. It should be just checked before deployment. If everything's okay, go further. If not, just check that, fix everything, so performance will be good to use any other functions, algorithm, and check that it will work. The performance test is good. Then you can deploy that. And after that, security, it can be used after performance one. So you check if performance is good. Security, if no SQL injection will broke your app, or XSS attack, or any other one. So just be sure that before deployment, these two are passed good: performance and security. They will guarantee you that everything works fine. And then with end-to-end test, you will see if everything is okay. For example, something has been down, or you have any attack or something like that. With end-to-end test, you will check that you can work with security testing. You can write some security tests for your end-to-end feature, and that can be also as a variant. But once more time, I think you shouldn't just checking that every time at night, because nothing will be changed. Your code won't be changed after you deploy that. So just check that before deployment. Also, I think that you can use smoke test also periodically, just to check that your API are up. You can check that, for example, each hour, if it is really important API, and that nothing is down, and it should be maximum lightweight request, just to check that everything is working good. And if you see there are some applications that are like shown you at the end, system is working correct, green button, or red button automatically. This is such test that is running periodically to check if all the APIs are working correct, if everything is okay, and just send you the result that everything's okay. Because there could be attack, or it can be any like a lot of people can come that you even couldn't imagine how many. So your system could be down, and such thing will help you to be sure with every hour or 30 minutes that your system is working correctly. So that's all. Thank you for coming here and checking all of these tests. And I hope that this video helped you. And if you want more, just like and subscribe and write in the comments what you're looking for next. All the best for you. Bye.